he said, "Why don't you water ski? You're a good water skier." So I water skied and jumped the shark, and then came Jump the Shark.
It was the show that felt like coming home. Every week, millions gathered to watch the Cunninghams navigate life in 1950s Milwaukee. It was simple, funny, and heartwarming, a formula that made Happy Days an American institution. But that trust between the show and its audience was shattered in a single moment of television absurdity. To save its #1 spot, the network approved a scene so ludicrous it would become a punchline for decades to come. This is the story of how a water-skiing Fonzie and a captive shark destroyed a television classic. The rise of a television titan. In the beginning, there was a quiet, almost forgotten version of Happy Days. The show's initial tone was gentle and character-driven, a soft focus look at 1950s nostalgia. It centered on Richie Cunningham, his wholesome parents, Howard and Marion, his sister Joni, and his goofy friends Potsy and Ralph Malph. What many people overlooked, and what history almost forgot, is that the show was only a modest success. It was well-liked, a comfortable part of the TV schedule, but it was nowhere near the ratings giant it was destined to become. It was on the verge of being just another forgotten sitcom, a footnote in television history. That all changed with the slow burn emergence of a minor character who was never meant to be a star. Arthur Fonzarelli, better known as the Fonz. Played by the then unknown Henry Winkler, Fonzie was a leather jacket-clad, motorcycle-riding greaser who was the absolute definition of cool. He was everything the clean-cut, polite Richie Cunningham wasn't. Here's the shocking part. Network executives were terrified of him. In their minds, he wasn't a lovable rogue. He was a hoodlum, a genuine criminal element that promoted gang culture. They fought his very existence on the show, insisting he couldn't wear his signature leather jacket in most scenes. The thing nobody tells you is that in those early episodes, Fonzie often wears a bland, light-colored windbreaker. It looks completely wrong, a forced attempt to make him less threatening. The network censors only allowed the iconic leather jacket when he was physically near his motorcycle, arguing it was technically a safety garment. It was a ridiculous compromise, but it was the only way the producers could keep a piece of his identity intact. But a funny thing happened. Audiences didn't see a hoodlum. They saw something special. They were crazy about him. Henry Winkler's portrayal gave the character a hidden heart that the executives never saw coming. He was tough on the outside, sure, but he was also fiercely loyal and often acted as a wise, albeit unconventional, older brother to Richie. He had a code of honor. His famous catchphrases, the simple "aye" and the dismissive "sit on it," became national sayings almost overnight. Kids everywhere were trying to copy his effortless cool. By the third season, the network couldn't ignore the truth. Fonzie mania had swept the country. The show's entire focus shifted dramatically. The quiet stories about Richie's life were pushed aside for Fonzie's incredible exploits. The character became almost superhuman. He could start a jukebox with a calculated tap of his fist, summon women with a snap of his fingers, and solve any problem with an unshakable swagger. The writers leaned into it, making him the undeniable center of the universe. The show, which was once on the bubble for cancellation, rocketed to #1 in the ratings. It became an unstoppable cultural force, all thanks to the magnetic pull of a side character they tried to hide in a windbreaker. The Fonz didn't just join Happy Days, he saved it, remade it in his own image, and became one of the most iconic television characters of all time. 3-part episode. By 1977, Happy Days was at the absolute peak of its power, but the pressure was immense. The show was the undisputed king of television, and the network, ABC, was terrified of losing that top spot. You see, in the world of network TV, staying #1 is everything. The writers were constantly pushed to come up with bigger, more exciting storylines for Fonzie. This led to a 3-part episode titled Hollywood, where the Cunninghams and Fonzie traveled to California. The plot was simple enough. A local tough guy challenges Fonzie to prove his legendary bravery. The challenge? To perform a death-defying water ski jump over a shark. The idea itself came from a bizarre behind-the-scenes detail. Henry Winkler's own father used to constantly tell him to show off his real-life water skiing skills on the show. Winkler was, in fact, a very skilled water skier. When he mentioned this to the writers, they concocted the stunt. To put it mildly, it was a moment born of desperation. The writers thought it was a fun, over-the-top way to showcase Fonzie's legendary courage. They never imagined it would become a cultural punchline that would haunt the show forever. The scene itself is a masterclass in television absurdity. Fonzie, clad in his signature leather jacket and a pair of swim trunks, revs up his motorcycle, then expertly straps into a pair of water skis. With the Cunninghams watching from the shore, he speeds across the water and launches off a ramp, soaring gracefully over a caged shark floating in the bay. The crowd on the beach erupts in cheers. On screen, it was presented as the ultimate triumph of Fonzie's coolness. But back in living rooms across America, something else was happening. Viewers who had fallen in love with the show's simple, character-driven charm were left scratching their heads. Fonzie jumping a shark? It felt less like a brave stunt and more like a cartoon. What many overlooked was that this wasn't just a silly scene. It was a betrayal of the show's identity. Happy Days had built its success on relatable stories about family, friendship, and growing up. The Fonz's cool worked because it was grounded in a realistic world. He was the larger-than-life figure in a normal town. But putting him on water skis, jumping over a shark, shattered that reality. It was a gimmick, a cheap thrill that sacrificed character for spectacle. The show had officially become a caricature of itself. The immediate reaction was mixed. The episode got huge ratings, and many younger viewers thought it was just a fun, silly moment. But for critics and older fans, the shark jump was a clear sign that the show had run out of ideas. It was the moment the writers seemed to admit they had nothing left to say about these characters, and were now just looking for bigger and crazier things for Fonzie to do. A phrase began to circulate among television writers and critics to describe this exact kind of moment: jumping the shark. It became the official term for when a beloved television show begins its decline in quality by resorting to desperate, unbelievable plot twists. The show had sold its soul, and everyone knew it. Life after the shark. Although Happy Days remained on the air for 6 more seasons after the infamous shark jump, it was never the same. The stunt marked a turning point, a creative peak from which there was only one way to go: down. The seasons that followed are a case study in what happens when a show loses its creative compass. The storylines became increasingly outlandish. One of the most famous examples was the introduction of Mork from Ork, an alien played by a then-unknown Robin Williams. While the Mork episode was a massive hit and launched the successful spin-off Mork and Mindy, it was another sign that Happy Days was drifting further and further from its grounded 1950s reality. The original heart of the show began to break apart. In 1980, Ron Howard, the actor who had been the show's anchor since the beginning, decided to leave. He had grown tired of playing the perpetually wholesome Richie Cunningham and wanted to pursue a career in directing. His departure left a massive hole in the series. Without Richie, the show lost its central narrator and its everyman perspective. The dynamic between Richie and Fonzie had been the core of the show for years, and without that anchor, Fonzie's character began to drift. He evolved from a cool outsider to a friendly auto shop teacher and property owner, a tamer, more domesticated version of his former self. Other original cast members also began to fade away. Don Most, who played Ralph Malph, left around the same time as Howard. The writers tried to fill the void with new, often bizarre characters. There was Chachi Arcola, Fonzie's younger cousin, who was meant to be a new teen heartthrob. There was Jenny Piccolo, Joni's boy-crazy friend, and Roger Phillips, Marion Cunningham's nephew who became a teacher at the high school. None of these new additions ever captured the magic of the original cast. What many people overlooked is that the show became a revolving door of new faces, each one a reminder of how far it had strayed from its roots. The ratings, once untouchable, began a slow but steady decline. While it was still a popular show, it was no longer the cultural force it had been in the mid-70s. The world was changing, and the innocent nostalgia of Happy Days started to feel dated. The very thing that had made it special, its simple, wholesome charm, now felt like a weakness. By the early 1980s, the show was a shadow of its former self. Many of the plots felt recycled, and the once sharp humor had grown tired. The final seasons are often forgotten by casual fans, a collection of episodes that felt more like an obligation than a creative endeavor. The show that once defined an era was now just another sitcom clinging to life. The show was a ghost, haunting its old time slot, the last days of Happy Days. By 1984, the writing was on the wall. After 11 long seasons and a staggering 255 episodes, ABC announced that the cultural phenomenon known as Happy Days would finally come to an end. To say the show had run its course would be a massive understatement. It had been years since the infamous episode where Fonzie, clad in his leather jacket, jumped over a shark on water skis. That single moment had become a cultural symbol for when a great show begins its slow, painful decline. The cast was exhausted and ready to move on, and the ratings had plummeted from their golden era peak. Creator Gary Marshall and his team of writers were acutely aware of the show's tarnished reputation. They were determined to give it the dignified and emotional farewell it deserved, a final episode that would wash away the bad taste of the later seasons and honor the legacy that had made it a global sensation. They would give fans the closure they had earned after more than a decade of loyalty. The finale, titled Passages, aired on May 8, 1984, and by all accounts, it was a masterclass in heartfelt television. The episode brought the entire show full circle, centering on the wedding of Joni and Chachi. This wasn't just a ceremony, it was a carefully crafted reunion, a reason to bring back beloved familiar faces and remind viewers of the incredible journey these characters had taken from simple beginnings to this emotional crescendo. The story wasn't about stunts or gimmicks. There were no sharks in sight. It was about family, love, and the bittersweet passage of time. Fonzie, the man who had always been a lone wolf, the icon of cool, served as Chachi's best man. In a moment that would have been unthinkable in the early seasons, he delivered a heartfelt speech about the profound importance of family. In one of the episode's most powerful storylines, Fonzie officially adopts a young orphan named Danny, finally becoming a father himself. For a character who had spent 11 seasons as the ultimate rebel, this was a moment of profound growth, proving that even the Fonz had found his place in a traditional family. But the most unforgettable moment, the scene that should have been forever etched in television history, belonged to Howard Cunningham, played by the brilliant Tom Bosley. In a bold and risky move that network executives had initially tried to shut down, Gary Marshall had Bosley break the fourth wall. As the wedding celebration wound down, Howard turned his gaze from the other characters and looked directly into the camera. Speaking not just as Howard, but as the patriarch of the entire Happy Days family, he thanked the audience for being part of their lives. "Thank you for being part of our family," he said, his voice thick with genuine emotion. "To Happy Days." It was a perfect, tear-jerking moment that acknowledged the unique bond the show had formed with its viewers. It was the perfect ending. Or, it should have been. This is where the story takes a turn from legendary to baffling. Due to a scheduling conflict earlier in the year because of the Winter Olympics, ABC had a handful of unaired episodes just sitting in a vault. In a bizarre and unprecedented move, the network decided to air these lost episodes after the perfect finale had already broadcast. For weeks after saying their tearful goodbyes, viewers were treated to random, out-of-context episodes that completely shattered the narrative's emotional conclusion. Why would a network sabotage its own perfect ending? Over the years, several wild theories have emerged. The official reason is boring and corporate: contractual obligations. The network had sold the ad space and simply had to air the episodes. But some insiders whisper that it was a test. The story of Happy Days is a warning about what happens when commerce overtakes creativity. But was the jump the shark moment a disastrous mistake, or an inevitable symptom of a show that had simply run too long? Let us know your thoughts below. Don't forget to like and subscribe,